Hey, it's Steve. Well, the 2020 donation layout is pretty much done. I'll still be adding a few more details, a few figures and things, but for the most part, things are at a point of completion. Again, I am donating this layout, and everything is pretty much coming out of pocket, and so I've already spent about $400 on this layout, so I'm not really going to want to spend a whole lot more on this project. So, besides adding a few figures, and a couple other minor details, things are pretty much about done. But anyway, let's take a look at how I wrapped up the scenery and the wiring for this project. So in the last video, I had already completed the tunnel portals and the retaining wall, and so now the main scenery left to do is to complete the top of the hillside at the back of the layout. Now the first layer was a combination of wood and foam. The left-hand side was wood just because I was putting some controls over there, and so I wanted to have a solid surface for those controls that wouldn't flex or anything if anyone pushed down hard on it. But the other side was all just solid foam. And reality is I probably could have used foam for everything and it probably still would have been fine, considering the Sculptamold that was added really did strengthen everything anyway. And so like everything else, the scenery was built up using layers of styrofoam insulation board, and those are glued down with some wood glue, and then a few nails helped to hold things in place as well while everything was drying. And then once that was complete, everything was covered with a nice thick layer of Sculptamold. However, the camera apparently was not recording, and so I don't have any video of that. Before the Sculptamold was actually dry, I just sifted on a layer of the dirt material that I used and let the Sculptamold itself help to secure some of that. But then I did go ahead and add some more scenic cement on top of that to really help secure everything really nice and solid. At this point, I wanted to go ahead and do some additional staining to the rock on top. And so I mixed up some of the Woodland Scenics washes and basically just kind of randomly put those in place in different areas on there to kind of just give a little more tint and color to the rock areas that were going to be left exposed after the final scenery work was done. And once that was in place, I put on another layer of scenic cements across the entire hillside area, and then sifted on layers of ground foam and leaf material as well, and then some foliage clumps to kind of just put a base layer of scenery on top of the hillside area. And then once that was in place, put yet another layer of scenic cement on top of everything to really get everything nice and secure. And so at this point, it was time to go ahead and start installing the trees. So for the bottom layer, since it's directly on top of the wood baseboard there, I had to drill some holes for the tree trunks. So basically just drilled holes that were about the same diameter as the wire trunks of the trees, and planted a few of those trees along the base area of the layout. For the top part of the layout is much easier, basically just taking a screwdriver, poking holes through the Sculptamold into the foam underneath, and then just gluing the trees directly into that layer. And that is one reason why I do like to have a solid layer of foam underneath the Sculptamold or plaster material, whatever I'm using for the layout scenery, because it does give you some actual structure when you're trying to plant your trees. If you have just a thin, shell of plaster material and you put the trees in there, it's hard to keep them standing upright because they don't have a lot of support on the bottom. And so by having that layer of foam underneath, you really get really solid support anytime you plant any trees into the scenery material. But anyway, from that point on, it's just a matter of planting all the remaining trees that I had, vacuuming everything up, and then I went ahead and just kind of touched up the scenery here and there where I might have damaged it by planting the trees. So at this point, it was time to actually install the structures on the layout. To do that, to give them a little more support, I added some foam pieces on the layout that were basically the same, that basically would fit into the bottom of the structures. In this way, the structures had some more kind of support to be glued onto to help them stay in place a little stronger. Now, all these structures are lit up using the Just Plug system from Woodland Scenics. And I'm also using the street lights with the Just Plug system, and so I went ahead before I got the structures in place, drilled the holes, which are just 1/8 inch diameter holes for the street lights, so I wouldn't damage the structures while I was installing the street lights. But for the most part, just putting the 1/8 inch diameter hole, the lights fit very snugly into those. One of them was just a little bit loose, so I added a little bit of glue, but the other one, it fits so snugly I didn't even need to add any glue to the base of the street lamp. Before I finally installed the structures here, I made sure that all the lights were in fact working, but it turns out with the Italian restaurant, the lights would not all light up using the single connector from the little distribution plug that was on the inside of the structure. So I'm not sure what was wrong with that, but I did have an extra plug sharing adapter that allows you to plug 4 cables into the one wire coming out to share the one plug on the control panel thing. And so I used that and basically plugged the lights into that, and then everything worked fine. So apparently there was just something wrong with the little distribution hub inside that restaurant. So just luckily I had one of those on hand extra, which made it pretty simple to go ahead and rewire this structure. So anyway, that is something to keep in mind. A lot of these structures have multiple lights plugged into a board that then has one wire coming out of it. So if you don't have some lights that are working, it may in fact just be a problem with that board. I don't know if that's a widespread issue or not. These are the first two structures I've ever had in the just plug system. So, but something to keep an eye on, going forward. The other structure I had was fine, so it wasn't a case that both of these had an issue, just the one. But anyway, once I had the wires put through the holes through the baseboard, I just went ahead and glued the bases with some super glue and wood glue. I used super glue to glue them to the actual sidewalk material, the plastic styrene there, and then I just used some wood glue on the foam to help secure it a little more strongly and provide a nice, wide coverage of support. And then once everything was glued down, I just added some weights to each structure to help everything stay secured while the CA was setting. And then once that was done, I kind of moved it to the other structure and made sure that one was secure as well. Now the automobile also is a just plug system, so I added a weight to the top of that pickup truck to keep it in place. And so the only thing I could glue to the base were the wheels, and so it was kind of difficult to keep that in one place without shifting around while the glue dried. Now I did want to have everything battery powered on this layout, and so I built a little control box for the lights. So I built a little box to contain the batteries for the light controls. Now, one of my astronomy Barlow lenses I had purchased in the past had a nice box that was about the right size for these two batteries, and so I basically used that to, as a battery box. And then it's just pretty much a matter of putting the wires through, and then I could have made the hole a little bit bigger where I could fit the whole plug, but I decided to keep the hole small, so I had to cut the wires and then solder them back together once on the inside of the box. But once that was done, really all I did was just paint the red box black to make it kind of be a little less noticeable when it was on the layout. And then for a handle, I just added a bolt and a couple little nuts on there to be able to grab the top of the box easily and pull it off. So next it was time to get the bottom of the layout wired up. So it was kind of a matter of getting the wires on the bottom through a hole that goes to the top of the layout where I had a little control box for the lights. And so it was just kind of going back and forth to get everything soldered together and the wires put through the hole. Now, they do give you these little adapter plugs that you can kind of connect everything together by just putting the wires in. But I decided to go ahead and solder everything anyway instead of using those, just because I figured it'd be, it would work out better in the long run. You wouldn't have, connections come loose over time or whatever from being moved around. So all the wires are soldered besides the ones that are actually plugged directly into the control box. And so once those wires were all soldered up, I went ahead and covered them with some black electrical tape. I then used some hot glue to kind of make sure that tape wouldn't come off. And then because I just like to make the bottom of the layout look nice as well, I painted the entire bottom of the layout with a flat black paint, just so it would look a little bit nicer if you're looking at the bottom of it, even though you're never going to generally see it. I just like to have the bottoms of the layouts look nice as well, in case someone is looking at it. And then the last step was to add some feet on there, so when you do put it on top of a piece of furniture, the wood's not going to scratch up whatever furniture piece that you happen to put the layout on top of. And so with everything pretty much done, then I just went ahead and added a second coat of the stain and polyurethane mix to the entire layout, and things were pretty much ready to go. Here's a look at some of the completed scenes, both daytime and nighttime. Again, a few more details will get added here before things are wrapped up, but this is pretty much the final state of the layout. Anyway, that's all for this video, and thanks for watching. Bye.